So just the other day, I was reading through Slashdot and I came across an article that looked interesting. It's this one out on the Verge here about OpenAI's ChatGPT Mac app. Apparently, it was storing conversations in plain text on your machine. Oh no. Now, before I dive into this article and give you some of my opinions, let's come over to the command line here. I have not yet updated my ChatGPT app on my Mac here. So my guess is we should be able to come into the app support directory for openai.chat. And inside of here, all right, there's a conversations. Let's come in here. All right, and if I list out the files here, bunch of goods. So let's do this. Take a look at one of these files here. I think there's a 495. All right, so this is just a binary property list. And that means I can use plutil here, pass the same file, 495, and it should dump out the contents of it. And if I scroll up a bit here, there you go. You can see the output of a conversation. This is part of a response that I got back from ChatGPT. So indeed, this is actually stored in plain text. Or technically speaking, it's in a binary plist file. Same thing at the end of the day, it's easy to get to the contents of it. All right, so the article, it's absolutely right that it has what could be considered a worrying security issue, though that doesn't sound as bad as a security flaw. And that is that you can easily find your chats on disk and you can read them in plain text. And so this article presumes then that meant if you have a bad actor or a malicious app and it had access to your machine, well, of course, if you've installed software on your machine, it's going to have access to your files. Then it's going to be able to easily read your conversations. Duh. So this is the part that just gets me because if you've got a machine that's compromised and you have software running on it that has compromised that machine, well, then why in the world would you assume you have some sort of protection from some other mechanism? That mechanism obviously could be exploited as well. And at the end of the day, if somebody really wants access to the chats, they'll get access to the chats. And down below here, one thing that I found entertaining is that the person that found this security flaw, they actually wrote an application. It's on the right-hand side here. Make this full screen. So here's their ChatGPT app. On the left and on the right, they have their chat stealer. And so then they're going to click the load chat button and then they steal the chat. Why do you go to the trouble of writing a chat stealer if you could just show the files on disk or in plain text? Why go to the trouble of making an entire application? I mean, it's possible, I suppose, that the layperson needs something to convince them that this is a problem. But beyond that, this is just a giant waste of time. Now, apparently, The Verge reached out to OpenAI about the issue, and the company has released an update, supposedly, that says it encrypts the chats. So what I want to do next here, I'm going to open up the ChatGPT app, and let's just see what happens when it updates here. Come down and check for updates, install and relaunch. All right. So now, let me come back to the command line, see if there are any files in here. Okay, that entire directory is gone now. Go up the directory here. So what do we have here? Anything in drafts? A few files in drafts. That's interesting. Actually, maybe I need to go up a directory here. They might have just moved the conversations directory. Okay, yeah, we still have files inside of here. Let's take a look at one of these 1.5. Look at that one. All right, so this one's data, so this one's definitely different. I assume if I were to dump out the contents of it, it's just going to be binary. It's going to be encrypted text. Yeah, absolutely. So now I can't see any of the conversation. So we've now added another layer of obfuscation to getting access to the chats. But at the end of the day, if you have that decryption key, well, you can still get to the text of the chats. And why is that important? Well, my machine, the hard drive is encrypted, so somebody can't just walk up to it and get access to the chats. I actually have to install an app that's compromised to be able to then read the chats. Well, if we just add another layer of encryption, nothing has really changed there, because it's very possible I could install an app that gets elevated permissions to access the decryption key and get to the chats anyways. So what do we need then? Yet another layer of encryption. And then if you scroll down here, this guy found out about this because he was checking out to see if the app was sandboxed. If it were sandboxed, then the application support files we saw would be set up inside of a separate container, and then other applications would not have automatic access to that container by default. But because it's not, it's a traditional app, that's why it's sitting here inside of the app support directory, and thus we have access to it from other applications like iTerm and the cat command. So perhaps one valid criticism is to understand why OpenAI is not choosing to sandbox their app, because that would add a degree of protection. They would probably take care of everything necessary, and you wouldn't even have to encrypt the chats then if they were isolated and it required special permissions to get to them. That would be just as good as using encryption. So I hope that was slightly informative about what's going on here. I really don't think any of this is a security flaw. At most, perhaps you could argue it's a design flaw. Adding a layer of encryption to obfuscate things doesn't really add much in security. And in some ways, if I have an app that has permissions to access those files, I might want to look inside of them. What if I want to read those files into another application? Now that they're encrypted on disk, that's one more hurdle if I wanted to write any sort of automation to work with those files or the ChatGPT app. And so I'm of the opinion this hasn't changed anything. We just moved the cheese as far as what we're doing with security. And I don't think at the end of the day, any of this was necessary. But you tell me, am I overlooking something? If so, leave me a comment at the bottom of the video.